Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we're going to be refactoring our pull trigger so that it's ready for us to add more code into. At the moment, it was getting really out of hand, so we're going to refactor it to a small function like this that's really much more straightforward to read. Let's dive in and see how to do this refactor. Okay, so we want to put some sound into our game, and the place we're going to be doing this is in the gun when we're shooting. That's the first port of call. I think a nice kind of shot sound and impact sound would be great. The only problem is when I came back to our pull trigger function, I noticed that it has got outlandishly large. It doesn't fit on one of my screens. It's also a little bit hard to read and understand where we'd be putting this functionality. So while we take the effort to actually understand what the functionality is here, maybe it's worth doing a quick refactor or pulling out some of this stuff into other methods so that it's not so hard to read. Now, if you go and have a look at this code and try and figure out what are the basic things that it's doing, then you'll see that a large chunk of this is actually just set up for our line trace, this whole chunk from line 28 down to 43. And what are we doing? Well, we're getting the owner pawn, then we're checking getting the owner's controller, then we're getting the viewport from that, then we're getting the end location based on the max range, and then we're passing in some hit parameters to ignore stuff. All of this is just set up for our line trace. So why don't we extract that out into its own function here? I'm going to create a new private function down right at the bottom after our variables. It is going to be bool return, because we want to essentially replace this call here that returns success with one that just gives us the hit result out as well. So we're going to do this as something I'm going to call a gun trace function, and it's going to have some out parameters here. Namely, one of them is going to be the hit result. So hit result ampersand to make it a reference, and because it's not a constant reference, we know it's an out parameter. We'll call this the hit. And actually there may be another one that we need here. Namely, I can see that we've got the rotation is coming out of this chunk of code, and in actual fact we're negating that rotation. So what we're really interested in is the shot direction, so maybe that's what we need to go for. So I'm going to create an f vector out parameter, so f vector ampersand, and it's going to be the shot direction. These are the two outputs that are going to come from our gun trace. Now let's go ahead and create that implementation here. And what we want to do is essentially just copy all of this code into there. See how it goes. And we also want to be checking this shot direction. Take that out there and stick it in just before the end, or maybe just here. After we've got our player viewport, we can set that the shot direction needs to be equal to the negative of the rotation. But it's important to note here that actually we want to be setting not a local variable. So if you put the type here, it's going to be setting a local shot direction. We want to delete that so that it is setting the shot direction in the out parameters, which actually means that it's setting the shot direction that we're going to be passing in the function that calls it. Same goes for the hit. We need to remove this local hit so that the hit being passed into line trace single by channel is the hit that was passed into gun trace. And then finally, is there anything else? There's this to-do line, which is now not needed. And also this be success, well, we just need to be returning the result of the line trace single by channel. That is going to be whether or not our gun trace has succeeded. So we've succeeded in making this indentation a little bit less. We can fit it all on one screen now, and it's a little bit easier to understand that, yes, all of this is related to getting a gun trace. We can go up to our gun CPP, and we can now set our be success up here. So bool be success, we're going to need to set as the gun trace, and we need to pass in some out parameters here. So we still need to declare those somewhere. If hit result, it's going to be one of them, which we're just going to call hit, and the other one was going to be an f vector called shot direction. And those are going to be passed in. So we're going to have the hit first, then the shot direction, and then semicolon at the end there. So that's going to make that just a little bit easier. However, I'm noticing we also need the owner controller. And I don't want the gun trace to be responsible for the owner controller. or for getting the owner controller, that doesn't sound like it's the responsibility of a gun trace to do that. It sounds okay for it to get a hit. It sounds okay for it to get a shot direction, but I'm going to draw the line at getting the owner controller. So for that, I'm going to put all of this code into another function, which both of them can call. So that's going to be a function that returns a controller star, and we're going to call it the get owner controller, and we can make that a const, as we know it's not meant to change any of the variables on our gun class. Let's create that implementation, just bring in the implementation from gun trace, fix up any indentation if necessary, and we're going to go ahead and simply return the owner control. So there's no need to do a null check here. That null check we do need to do in the function that is using it. So we'll bring that up there. We also don't need to set a variable in here. We can just go ahead and return. So it's going to be fairly straightforward, our get owner controller, but not completely. And then we're going to set the variable in gun trace. So owner controller is going to be get owner controller, like so, which we then do a null early return in gun trace, which, by the way, needs to return a Boolean because gun trace is returning a Boolean. So we can go ahead and return false here, because if we can't get an owner controller, we can't do a gun trace, therefore we can't possibly hit anything. And then we also need that owner controller further up, where we have our hit actor. We're doing this take damage. And basically what we want to do here is get the owner controller right in here inside our hit actor. So if we've hit an actor, we get the owner controller again. Now I know there's a little bit of gun traces calling get owner controller, and then we're doing it again if we hit an actor, but that's only going to happen every time we hit an actor. So I don't mind having that recalculated twice, because it's just going to make the code that little bit more readable without having to store variables and state that could get out of sync. So there you go. We now got the owner controller that we need for take damage, and our pull trigger is looking much better. So that's it for this lecture. Quick one, just refactoring our pull trigger so that we've got a good base to work from in the next lecture. And I'll see you there.